Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different from the meta videos. So normally on the channel we go over, for Constructed, the best performing meta decks. We look at statistics from Mtg, which tracks win rates for users. So it tracks your win rates and then aggregates with other users and gives us a whole bunch of cool stats. If you want to use them tapped, it's in the link in the video description. Today we're going to be focusing on Historic Brawl. So we did this a while ago. But what we're going to cover is kind of two things here. We're going to look at the popularity of decks in terms of which decks see the most play. And then we're going to look at the top 10 decks in terms of win rate percentage. These are the decks that have the highest win rates over the last couple weeks in terms of Historic Brawl. Now, the thing to preface with Historic Brawl, it's really dependent on what you want to get out of it. If you want to be a little bit spikier, you can. If you want to go janky, you can. And the thing is, there's no necessary this is the exact list. When it comes to Brawl, if you're missing some cards, you could slot in other things. The thing that usually a focus is mana base, being able to cast your spells, but the big thing is just to have fun. There's decks that I play that I just like the archetypes or kind of interactions, and then I kind of go with that. So always preface that. These will be kind of general ideas, kind of themes, ideas for you to get going. If you want a shell to kind of port in, I'll paste all the deck lists into the video description so you can also include it there. If you are looking for the constructed format, Standard, Explorer, Historic, Alchemy, I have a video called Metagame Playlist, or a weekly metagame breakdown that goes over each of these decks. So a lot of importable deck lists there if you need ideas for decks. So we're going to start off with popularity of the day. So don't worry necessarily about the date. This is just kind of focusing on which are the most played commanders today. So a lot of it is usually influenced by the most recent set, people trying out new commanders, but there's also a mix of just cards that kind of stick towards the top. So the most popular deck right now is Etali at 3.6%. So they're generally bucketed around the same amount. But we have Etali, we have Sauron, the Dark Lord that comes in here, the Grixis commander, Imoti, which is a Cascade Simic commander, Ragavan, Smeagol, Atraxa Grand Unifier, Tom Bombadil, and then Aragon the Uniter. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and look at the actual stats. So in terms of percentage, we're looking June 20th through July 12th, so almost a month worth of data. A combined total of 540,000 games of Historic Brawl were covered for this video. So the highest win rate deck, as you see here, is the Atraxa Grand Unifier deck. So we're not going to go through it card by card, but the general idea is what this deck's trying to do and kind of seeing, let's see which view. This view is probably the easiest to see. So with Atraxa Grand Unifier, the big thing in this deck is it's kind of like a ramp control, good stuff mid-range deck. The big thing is with these control decks is you often try to trade one for one, but you run out of cards. The big thing with Atraxa is you cast Atraxa, it replaces your hand, it finds you lands. Even if they kill the Atraxa, you usually find at least one of the next lands and maybe a ramp spell to help you recast Atraxa. In and of itself, it's just a very large body with a lot of keywords that make it difficult to deal with. The deck's kind of just backing up a whole bunch of different counter spells, disruption, so you have things like Duress, Inquisition for hand hate, cheap counters with Swan Song, Wash Away for protection, cheap removal in Swords to Plowshare, Dark Ritual can help you ramp. So there's a lot of kind of utility in those cases. There's a bunch of early ramp with Growth Spiral, Explore, Cold Steel Heart, Arcane Signet, Celestis, Skyclave Relic, Cultivate, Black Market Connection. So lots of ways to kind of get you ahead on mana. Your general win condition oftentimes will be the Atraxa itself, just being a very powerful threat. And then you have just various types of removal. Shieldred's in here. Tameo can rebuy you stuff. Teferis, Time Warps for extra turns. Got 3 extra turn spells here. You also have the Emergent Ultimatum, where you can basically just choose all 3 times Time Walk effects and just kind of get your opponent that way there. Also a Kaya on the top end. In this shell, if you have other Planeswalkers you enjoy, other kind of win conditions, they usually the Emergent package I usually do is Omniscience, Time Walk, and All Runs Epiphany. You can do other instances, but it is kind of a control deck that's ultimately winning through the Atraxa Grand Unifier. Because this is a 4-color deck, the mana base, as you can see, is very expensive. So it is something that is not a very budget-friendly deck. From there, we go over to Jor Kadeen. So this was a deck I was actually kind of surprised to see do this well at 71%. So Jor Kadeen, if we pull it up, 2 mana, 2/2 trample. When Jor first enters, when it first attacks. Oh no, its name is first. That's very confusing. Jor Kadeen, first Gold Warden, attacks. It gets plus XX until end of turn, where X is the number of equipped creatures you control. Then, if its power is 4 or greater, you draw a card. So this is a Boros equipment themed deck. So it's kind of low to the ground, aggressively slanted. You'll have various kind of accelerants, Bonesaw, cheap equipment. Mox Amber with a cheap commander is also really nice. So you have like your tax effects, Sentinel, cheap removal, Surge for protection, Skrell for protection, Savior for protection. Ragavan is a nice threat there. And then just a bunch of cheap kind of effects. If you mana tithe your opponent, always feels good. But like Fragmentize, Fragment Reality, lots of cheap effects here. Flowering of the World Tree is a nice addition here. So a lot of just kind of cheap effects. Arm Scavenger keeps finding you more and more equipments. And then you just kind of play it out like that. So a very aggressively slanted deck. You have like Lelia in here, Angel Fire Ignition, Ambergris, Akiri. You have a couple swords in here that you could throw in. You have Halvar. You can play some copies of Nahiri in here as well. So a lot of different options if you're interested in this type of shell. From there, we'll jump to Ragavan, Monkey. So very powerful 1-drop. If it comes down, you can basically run away with the game if your opponent doesn't have an answer on 1. Seems like whenever I play against this deck, my opponent always goes first and has it on the play. So when it deals combat damage, you get to exile a top card of their library and then play it on the turn. You also get a treasure, so it helps you ramp. You can kind of solo your opponent by playing all their cards. It is a kind of a mono red aggressive deck, so you'll have a bunch of cheap burn, proactive creatures, so like Strangle, Shivan Fires, Play with Fire, Lightning Bolt, Lava Mancer kind of gets some burn damage, Dragon Master Outcast can start making dragons, so lots of just kind of ways to attack into your opponent, burn them out kind of style. So if you like mono red aggro, probably something to take a look at. And then you have things like your Torbrands, Sophins, double damage, Koth lets you eventually ultimate, helps you ramp up, so kind of a cool shell there as well. We'll then jump to Rusko, the Clockmaker. So the once most annoying commander, I think, on the format until Atraxa came out. So Rusko, we'll flip over to this view, it's easier to see. Enters the battlefield, you get to create a Midnight Clock. Midnight Clock lets you shuffle cards into your library and draw 7 once the clock hits 12. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, opponent loses a life, you gain a life, and then you put a counter on Midnight Clock, so it helps you ramp up. So this is pretty much a control shell that is going to be using effects. Basically just control the game. Rusko's your win condition. You can refill your hands each time, so counter spells, removal spells, card advantage, all kind of mixed into here. Ways to protect your Rusko, like Swan Song as a protection spell, Pierce, Miscast, lots of cheap 1 mana spells that with the mana, because you pay 4, but then this generates 1 mana off the Midnight Clock that turn. Each time you cast Rusko as well, it provides you that 1 additional mana to get closer to casting it again. So some utility and value there. We'll then go to the first Sliver. So this is one of my favorite decks to play because I love Cascade and the Maelstrom Wanderer's not here. So first Sliver is usually just a good stuff deck. Ramp, kind of play out fun things, 5 color. It's 5 mana, 7/7 that lets you Cascade, which means you reveal cards from your top of your library. The first spell that's 4 CMC or less, you get to cast for free and then kind of get some value there. So the deck's playing a bunch of ramp effects. And then you kind of just play like all the bangers on the top end. You have like Ruskos in there, Time Warps, Teferis, Kayas, Golos. You have Vorinclex, so you have likely the Emergent Ultimatum. You're just playing a bunch of ultimatums. You got Paraders in here. You got Ulamog. You got Zakama, Portal to Phyrexia. So if you like big mana decks, like playing all the colors, something to definitely check out here. We'll then go to Zimone and Dina. So switching over the view, Zimone Dina is a Sultai, green, black, blue. Whenever it's a kind of a draw 2 themed deck. So whenever you draw your second card each turn, opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. You can also sacrifice creatures to draw lands and kind of growth spiral. So this is like a Sultai ramp kind of shell. Lots of incidental ways to draw 2 between like Wall of Blossoms, Uro, Elvish Visionary, Dusk Legion Zealot. Then these creatures you can sack and get some value. You have like another Rusko, like ways to kind of ramp you up, Timeless Witness to buy stuff back, Oracle of Alpha to get the power 9 in your deck. And then this is another Margin Ultimatum deck, things like Breach the Multiverse. So a lot of these Sultai colored decks have the ability to kind of combo out with Emergent Ultimatum to get a whole bunch of value on your opponent. From there, we'll go to Imoti. So Imoti is another Cascade, Simic, 5 mana, 3/1. Spells you cast with 6 mana or greater have Cascade. So it's kind of an early ramp deck, lots of ways to put lands or get ahead on mana. Casting Imoti and then just big mana things. Nissa, Coma, Hullbreaker Horror, Extra Turns, Kogala. You got the Paraders in here with like Vorinclex, Verdant Rejuvenation, Ulamog. So lots of ways to kind of just get value. So another kind of similar to like the first Sliver, but it's kind of just Simic, big stompy style effects. We'll then go to Balmor. So this is more of an aggressive deck at 64%. So Balmor is kind of a spell slinger, similar to how it gets played in Historic with the Wizard's Shell. So you're going to play it out, and then whenever you cast instant sorceries, your creatures get +1/0 and trample to end a turn. So you'll see this very, 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 very long list of 1 mana spells. So lots of cheap spells, lots of ways to pump your effects, burn damage, you have things like Infuriate that gives them a boost, Kick in the Door, puts counters, gives haste, Lightning Bolts, just a bunch of ways to like target, gets a bunch of effects, Unleash Fury, doubles up, so lots of ways to kind of deal damage that. You have like effects like We Dragonauts, Umara Mystic that get power boosts when you cast instants or sorceries, and then normally you can have a really big creature but they get chump blocked, but Balmor gives them trample as well. So if you like a very aggressive deck, this one's relatively cheap in terms of budget as well, I would imagine. The mana base isn't overly convoluted, and a lot of these spells incidentally just happen to be commons and uncommons mixed into there. We'll then go to Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. So Panharmonicon that shuts off your opponent's effects. So it doubles your enter the battlefield effects while eliminating your opponents. So this is all focused on doubling up ETBs. So like 2 investigates, you have Ephemerate to kind of get that value, double lands, double exile effects like Baffling End, Touch the Spirit Realm, stuff of that nature. You have Charming Prince that can do some blinks. Blade Splicer makes extra tokens. Lauren can blow up a lot of things that just kind of incidentally draw cards. You also have Panharmonicon to get extra value. One of my favorite cards of all time, Restoration Angel. Regal Caracal gets you a bunch of cats. You can double up on like Mightstone, Meekstone, Sky Sovereign. So a whole bunch of cool effects. Double Portal to Phyrexia. So if you like mono white, if you like kind of the Panharmonicon ETB style effects, something to check out there. And lastly, the most popular deck is actually the 10th highest in win rate, but it is a very consistent deck, I would say. So Etali, Primal Conquer, 7 mana. Basically, the whole premise of the deck is ramp up to this, cast it, you get to cast a card from your deck, you get to cast a card from your opponent's deck that's on top. A lot of free value here. If they don't answer it, you can flip it to Etali Primal Sickness and try to poison your opponent. If they do kill it, generally, most of the time, like I find my opponent just hits like a ramp spell that gets them more mana, and then they just cast it again. So it's like, if they answer it, they get more value, but if you don't answer it, then they kill you. So a nice Gruul Stompy style list, lots of cool cards like Vorinclex, got a kind of dinos in here, Nissa, Luca, Goldspan Dragon on the top end, a bunch of Chandras, Carney T, like just dragons. It's like a Timmy's Delight. Every big creature, big dumb thing. Emrakul, Ulamog, Portal, Cityscape Leveler. So if you like to go stompy, another option here. So that's it for that. These are the top 10 decks currently in terms of win rates. Let me know what you think of this type of content, and we'll probably do it maybe like once every 2-3 weeks, or maybe as new sets release to give folks some ideas in terms of what new cards are out there and what kind of builds. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.